The conference room fell silent when Commander Hyun finished speaking. Around the large table sat representatives from 12 different alien species, each one more advanced than humanity. They had longer lives, better weapons, and ships that could cross the galaxy in days. Yet here they were, losing a war. One soldier? High Chancellor Vektar's voice carried disbelief. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of confusion among his people. Commander, we have lost 3 worlds to the Voidborn Collective. Millions of our warriors have fallen, and you propose sending 1 human? Hyun remained calm. He had expected this reaction. Not just any human, Chancellor. A specialist. Ambassador Taejin stood beside Hyun, his formal robes a sharp contrast to the commander's military uniform. The Federation has fought the Voidborn for 8 months, using traditional warfare, fleet against fleet, army against army. We've lost every major engagement. Which is why we need more ships, more weapons, argued a tall alien with silver skin. Not fewer soldiers. Hyun activated the holographic display. Images filled the air above the table, showing Voidborn forces spreading across the galaxy like a plague. The Voidborn operate as a hive mind. Every soldier, every ship, every commander shares one consciousness. They coordinate perfectly, adapt instantly, and never break formation. We know this already, Vektar said impatiently. Then you know their strength is also their weakness, Hyun replied. They've never faced an enemy who doesn't fight fair. They've never encountered someone who operates alone. In silence, in shadows, the aliens looked at each other, confused. In their cultures, war was honorable combat between organized forces. The idea of one person sneaking behind enemy lines seemed primitive, almost shameful. I don't understand, admitted a counselor. What can one person do that our armies cannot? Ambassador Taejin smiled slightly. Let me tell you about humanity's history. For the next hour, Taejin explained concepts foreign to the galactic community. Guerrilla warfare, special operations, psychological tactics. He spoke of human conflicts where small groups defeated massive armies through stealth, patience, and fear. The aliens listened with growing unease. Your species fought wars against yourselves this way? Asked Vektar, horrified. We learned hard lessons, Taejin said quietly. We learned that sometimes the quietest approach is the deadliest. Across the city, in a plain apartment, Kang Ji-hoon cleaned his equipment. He worked with practiced efficiency, his movements economical and precise. Each tool had a purpose. Each weapon had been tested 1,000 times. Nothing fancy, nothing unnecessary. His communicator buzzed, a single message from Lee Yuna. They approved it. Fars rung. Briefing in 1 hour. Ji-hoon didn't smile or celebrate. He simply continued his work. He had been preparing for this mission since the war began, studying Voidborn tactics, learning their patterns, understanding their hive mind mentality. While other soldiers trained to fight armies, Ji-hoon trained to dismantle them from within. The briefing room was smaller, more secure. Only Yuna, Hyun, and Ji-hoon attended. Talos Prime, Yuna began, displaying a planet on the screen. The Voidborn captured it 6 weeks ago. Intelligence suggests they've established a command nexus there, coordinating attacks on surrounding systems. Population? Ji-hoon asked. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. Evacuated before the invasion. The planet is now fully militarized. Estimated 200,000 Voidborn soldiers, 300 ships in orbit, sensor networks covering every kilometer. Extraction plan? There isn't one. Hyun said bluntly. We can get you to the surface. But retrieval depends on you creating your own opportunity. Ji-hoon nodded. He had expected as much. Yuna continued. Your mission has 3 objectives. First, gather intelligence on Voidborn command structure. Second, identify vulnerabilities in their coordination network. Third, she paused, disrupt their operations however you see fit. Rules of engagement? Whatever works, Hyun said. The Federation wants traditional warfare. We're giving them something else. Ji-hoon studied the planetary scans. Cities built by the former inhabitants now housed voidborn warriors. Every building crawled with enemy forces. Sensor towers watched the skies. Patrol patterns crisscrossed the surface in perfect geometric efficiency. They think like a machine, Ji-hoon observed. Because they are a machine, Yuna replied. Millions of parts working as one. Machines break, Ji-hoon said simply. You just need to find the right pressure point. 24 hours later, a small stealth pod launched from the human carrier ship. Inside, Ji-hoon sat motionless, his breathing slow and measured. The pod was barely large enough for one person, designed to slip through sensor nets undetected. The descent through Talos Prime's atmosphere was rough. Warning lights flashed as the pod's heat shields strained. Ji-hoon ignored them, focusing instead on memorizing the landing zone coordinates. The pod would self-destruct after deployment, leaving no trace. Impact came hard. The pod crashed into a dense forest far from any voidborn settlement. Ji-hoon waited, listening. Sensor drones buzzed overhead, searching for the intrusion. He remained perfectly still for 6 hours until they passed. When he finally emerged, night had fallen. Ji-hoon activated his suit's camouflage. Becoming a shadow among shadows, he moved through the forest like water, never breaking a branch, never disturbing the undergrowth. 5 kilometers from the landing site, he encountered his first voidborn patrol. 6 soldiers moving in perfect synchronization, their weapons sweeping in coordinated arcs. Ji-hoon observed from concealment, noting their patterns, their communication intervals, their blind spots. He didn't engage. Not yet. Instead, he followed them back to their outpost, a small facility housing perhaps 50 soldiers. Security cameras covered every angle. Sentries rotated with mechanical precision. To any conventional army, it would be impregnable. Ji-hoon watched for 2 days, mapping routines, identifying the commander, understanding the facility's purpose. It was a sensor relay station, feeding data to the larger network. On the 3rd night, he moved. The first sentry never saw him. One moment the corridor was empty, the next the guard was unconscious, carefully hidden. Ji-hoon moved to the communications center, his footsteps silent on the metal floor. He didn't destroy the equipment. That would be too obvious. Instead, he made subtle changes, altered a sensor calibration here, adjusted a reporting frequency there, small modifications that would cause confusion rather than alarm. The commander died in his sleep. A quick and painless end. Ji-hoon arranged the body to look natural. Heart failure, perhaps. The hive mind would investigate, but find nothing suspicious. By dawn, Ji-hoon was gone, kilometers away, leaving behind a facility that would slowly poison the information network with false data. In orbit, Voidborn Command analyzed reports. Minor glitches in Sector 7. Nothing serious. Probably equipment degradation. They assigned a repair team and dismissed it. They had no concept of sabotage, no understanding of an enemy who struck from shadows. Ji-hoon moved to his 2nd target, then his 3rd. Each attack was different, each designed to create confusion rather than destruction. A patrol that vanished without a trace, supplies that mysteriously spoiled, equipment that malfunctioned at critical moments. The Voidborn Collective noticed patterns in the chaos. Random failures were spreading across Talos Prime. Their perfect coordination was developing blind spots. In their shared consciousness, a word began to form. Not a word they understood, but one that came from intercepted human transmissions. A designation, Reaper. They didn't know what it meant yet, but they would learn. On Earth, Yuna received Ji-hoon's first coded transmission. 5 words: seeds planted, harvest begins soon. Commander Hyun allowed himself a small smile. The Galactic Federation wanted to fight the Voidborn with honor and tradition. Humanity would teach them a different way. Sometimes the greatest victories came not from the strongest army, but from the soldier nobody saw coming. 3 weeks into the mission, the Voidborn Collective experienced something it had never known before. Uncertainty. Collective Node 7 reviewed the data again, searching for patterns in the chaos. 17 outposts reported equipment failures. 23 officers had died from apparent natural causes. Patrol groups vanished, their last transmissions showing nothing unusual. Sensor networks developed blind spots that shouldn't exist. Analysis? Node 7 queried the collective consciousness. The response came from thousands of minds simultaneously. Probability suggests systematic sabotage. Source unknown. No physical evidence detected. Hypothesis? Insufficient data. Recommend increased security protocols. Node 7 implemented the changes. More patrols. More sensors. More guards at every facility. The Voidborn pulled forces from offensive operations to protect their own infrastructure. On the Federation flagship, Commander Nara studied the tactical display with growing fascination. The Krill warrior had spent 3 centuries in military service, fighting a dozen wars across the galaxy. She had never seen anything like this. The Voidborn offensive has stalled, her tactical officer reported. They're consolidating forces around Talos Prime. Why? Nara wondered aloud. They had momentum. 3 more systems were vulnerable. Ambassador Taejin appeared on the communications screen. They're afraid, Commander. Afraid? Of what? We haven't launched any counterattacks. Not afraid of armies, Taejin explained. Afraid of shadows, of the unknown, of something they can't understand or predict. Nara's eyes narrowed. The human operative? His name is Ji-hoon, callsign Reaper. Taejin sent a data file. These are his confirmed actions over the past 3 weeks. Nara read the report twice. 47 high-value targets eliminated. 0 casualties to Federation forces. 62 separate sabotage operations. Not one piece of physical evidence left behind. Impossible, Nara breathed. One person can't accomplish this. That's what makes it work, Taejin said. The Voidborn think the same way you do. They're looking for an army, a fleet. Something that makes sense to them. They can't conceive of a single soldier being this effective. On Talos Prime, Ji-hoon moved through an underground supply depot. His suit's camouflage made him nearly invisible, bending light around his form. He worked quickly, contaminating medical supplies with harmless but detectable bacteria. Not enough to kill, just enough to make the Voidborn question their entire supply chain. He heard voices approaching. 2 Voidborn technicians, their conversation transmitted through the Hivemind's communication network. Node 7 has ordered complete inventory checks, one said. Again? That's the 3rd time this week. The anomalies are spreading. Command suspects contamination. Contamination from what? We control this entire planet. Ji-hoon listened carefully. The Voidborn were starting to doubt their own security. Perfect. He slipped away before they entered the depot, leaving no trace of his presence. By the time they discovered the contaminated supplies, he would be kilometers away, working on his next target. Dr. Choi Suji sat in her laboratory aboard the human research vessel, analyzing intercepted Voidborn communications. As a xenobiologist specializing in hive minds, she found the data fascinating. They're fragmenting, she told Yuna during their daily briefing. Not physically, but psychologically. Look at these communication patterns. The screen showed graphs of Voidborn neural transmissions. Normally they flowed in perfect synchronization. Now, small discrepancies appeared. Hesitations. Repeated queries. Redundant security checks. What does it mean? Yuna asked. The hive mind operates on shared certainty, Suji explained. Every individual knows exactly what every other individual knows. But now, they're experiencing doubt. When one node questions something, that doubt spreads through the entire collective. So Ji-hoon isn't just destroying their equipment, he's destroying their confidence. Exactly. And for a species that's never known individual fear, this is catastrophic. Yuna forwarded the analysis to Commander Hyun, who shared it with the Federation Council. The alien leaders listened in stunned silence. You're saying this human has weaponized fear? High Chancellor Vektar asked. Not just fear, Hyun corrected. Uncertainty. The Voidborn have always known exactly where their enemies are. what they're doing, how they're organized. Now, they're fighting an enemy who breaks all those rules. Park Min-ho received his deployment orders with typical efficiency. Like Ji-hoon, he was a specialist in ghost operations, trained in the same tactics, the same philosophy of invisible warfare. Your mission is support, Yuna briefed him. Ji-hoon is primary operator. You'll work independently but coordinate targeting. Has he requested backup? No. He explicitly stated he works alone. Yuna smiled slightly. But we're giving you to him anyway. 2 operators, double the psychological impact. Minho understood. If the Voidborn thought 1 ghost was terrifying, 2 would be worse. And if they worked in different sectors simultaneously, the enemy would think there were dozens. His insertion went smoothly, landing 200 kilometers from Ji-hoon's last known position. Minho established a hidden camp in an abandoned mining facility and began his own campaign of disruption. The first sign that something had changed came from Node 7. Reports flooded in from multiple sectors. Equipment failures in the north. Missing patrols in the south. Sabotaged communications in the east, all occurring simultaneously. Probability analysis, Node 7 demanded. The collective's response took longer than usual. Insufficient data. Multiple sources suggested. Coordination indicates organized operation. For the first time, Node 7 experienced something that individual beings knew well but the hive mind had never felt. Confusion. How many enemies operate on Talos Prime? Unknown. That single word rippled through the collective consciousness like poison. Unknown. They had conquered 17 worlds, destroyed countless fleets, absorbed entire civilizations. They always knew. They always had perfect information. Until now. Commander Nara watched the tactical display update in real time. Voidborn forces were pulling back from 3 planned invasion routes, redeploying to Talos Prime. Entire battle groups abandoned offensive positions to guard supply lines and command facilities. They're panicking, her tactical officer observed. No. Nara corrected. Understanding dawning. They're adapting. But they're adapting to the wrong threat. They think they're facing an army in hiding. She pulled up historical human military records, files that Ambassador Taejin had provided. Vietnam. Afghanistan. Resistance movements throughout Earth's bloody history. Nara began to understand. What made humans different? Other species fought for territory, for resources, for survival. Humans fought for ideas, and they had learned, through centuries of conflict, that sometimes the best way to win was to make the enemy defeat themselves. Ji-hoon and Minho never met, never communicated directly, but their actions synchronized perfectly through Yuna's coordination. When Ji-hoon struck a command post in the western continent, Minho sabotaged a weapons depot in the east. When Minho eliminated a supply convoy, Ji-hoon corrupted an intelligence database. The Voidborn saw patterns everywhere, connections that didn't exist, phantom armies in the shadows. Node 7 accessed the human communication intercepts, searching for information. One word appeared repeatedly in Federation transmissions. Reaper. The translator provided multiple meanings: a harvester of crops, a collector of souls, death itself. Node 7 felt something new, something that individual consciousness had known since the first organisms developed brains. Fear. It tried to suppress the emotion, to push it back into the collective where it would be diluted among millions. But fear, once felt, was hard to forget. And in a hive mind where every thought was shared, one individual's fear became everyone's fear. Across Talos Prime, Voidborn soldiers began checking shadows, questioning sensor readings, hesitating before following orders. The perfect machine was developing cracks. On Earth, Commander Hyun received the latest intelligence reports. The Voidborn offensive had completely stalled. 3 invasion fleets sat idle, diverted to defensive positions. Casualty rates among Federation forces had dropped to near zero. 2 men, he said quietly to Ambassador Taejin. 2 soldiers are changing the course of an interstellar war. Not just changing it, Tejan replied. They're teaching the galaxy a lesson. Power isn't just about size. It's about knowing where to apply pressure. High Chancellor Vektar requested a private meeting with the human delegation. When they arrived, they found him studying human military history on his personal display. I don't understand your species, Vektar admitted. You have smaller ships, shorter lives, less advanced technology. Yet you win battles that should be impossible. We learned something the hard way, Tejan said. Sometimes the greatest weapon is the enemy's own mind. In the shadows of Talos Prime, Jihun prepared his next operation. The Voidborn were afraid now, confused, dividing their forces. But he wasn't done. The real harvest was just beginning. The Galactic Federation launched its counter-offensive on the 45th day of Jihun's mission. Admiral Seo commanded the human fleet alongside Krill, Savarine, and a dozen other species warships. They expected fierce resistance. Instead, they found confusion. Voidborn battle formation is breaking apart, reported the tactical officer, his voice uncertain. Their ships are retreating? Retreating where? Admiral Seo demanded. Back to Talos Prime, all of them. They're abandoning 3 star systems to consolidate around their command world. Commander Nara, coordinating from her flagship, couldn't believe the data. The Voidborn Collective had never retreated before, never showed defensive behavior. Their entire strategy was based on overwhelming offensive force. What happened? She asked over the shared communication channel. Ambassador Tejan appeared on screen, and for once, he was smiling. They're protecting their commanders. Our operatives have convinced them that nowhere is safe. Within 6 hours, Federation forces reclaimed 3 star systems without firing a shot. The Voidborn simply abandoned them, pulling every ship and soldier back to defensive positions. On Talos Prime, the Voidborn Prime Nexus convened an emergency session. This massive bioship, hidden in the Kelvar Nebula near the planet, housed the collective's central intelligence. It was the brain that coordinated billions of Voidborn across the galaxy. Status report, the Prime Nexus demanded. Node 7, now assigned to internal security, delivered the grim assessment. 73 confirmed sabotage incidents. 147 assassinated officers. Communications compromised in 16 sectors. Supply chains disrupted. Morale deteriorating. Morale? The Prime Nexus had never considered that word before. The collective didn't have morale. It had efficiency, coordination, unity, incorrect terminology. Node 7 corrected itself. Individual nodes experiencing operational hesitation. Efficiency reduced by 32% due to redundant security protocols and psychological uncertainty. Identify the source. Human operative. Designation. Reaper. Possibly multiple operators using the same call sign. The Prime Nexus processed this information. One creature, maybe a few, was crippling an empire of billions. Impossible. Yet the data confirmed it. Assign elimination as priority directive. Deploy specialized hunting units. ATB, B. Node 7 assembled a task force unlike any the Voidborn had created before. It included Korthen, a Savarine mercenary famous across the galaxy for tracking impossible prey. The warrior had hunted on 100 worlds, from frozen wastes to volcanic hellscapes. You're paying me to hunt one person? Korthen asked, his voice a deep rumble. One person who has defeated an army. Node 7 replied. Will you accept? Korthen studied the mission file. The target's tactics. The psychological profile. The pattern of strikes. A slow smile crossed his reptilian features. Finally, a worthy challenge. Envoy Hana worked from a small office aboard the Federation flagship, crafting something more dangerous than any weapon. A story. She compiled every report about the Reaper, every mysterious incident, every unexplained Voidborn loss. Then, she began leaking information through channels she knew the Voidborn monitored. The message was simple. The Reaper wasn't alone. There were teams of them, Dozens, perhaps, operating throughout voidborne space. Each one a ghost, each one unstoppable. It was a lie. There were only 2 human operators. But perception mattered more than truth. Dr. Suji analyzed the voidborne communication networks and noticed something remarkable. The word Reaper had become a virus in their shared consciousness. Every time a node mentioned it, fear rippled through the collective. The hive mind was supposed to dilute individual emotions, but instead, it was amplifying them. "It's brilliant," she told Yuna during their conference. "They can't stop thinking about it. The more they try to suppress the fear, the more it spreads through their network. Can they overcome it? Not without fragmenting their collective consciousness," Suji explained. "They'd have to stop sharing information completely. And if they do that, they lose their main advantage." Yuna forwarded this to Ji-hoon through encrypted channels. His response was brief. "Understood." Increasing pressure. Captain Song Dae-hyun commanded the Human Rapid Response Team, 30 soldiers trained in extraction operations. They waited in orbit, aboard a stealth ship, ready to pull Ji-hoon and Minho out at a moment's notice. But the call never came. "Sir, we've been on standby for 6 weeks, his second-in-command said. "Shouldn't we check in?" "No," Dae-hyun replied. "Radio silence, until they signal. That's the protocol. What if they need help?" Dae-hyun looked at the tactical display showing voidborne forces in complete disarray. "I don't think they need our help." Ji-hoon moved through an underground voidborne intelligence center, his footsteps silent on the metal floors. He had spent 2 days infiltrating the facility, bypassing sensors, avoiding patrols, becoming part of the shadows. The central database contained information about voidborne operations across 12 star systems. Ji-hoon didn't destroy it. That would be wasteful. Instead, he corrupted it with false data, phantom threats, imaginary enemy movements, fabricated intelligence reports. The voidborne would waste resources chasing ghosts, while real threats went unnoticed. As he worked, he heard voices. Guards approaching early, ahead of their scheduled patrol. Ji-hoon melted into an alcove, becoming perfectly still. "Node 7 says the Reaper might be in this sector," one guard transmitted. "Node 7 says the Reaper might be everywhere." Another replied with what sounded like frustration. "We've checked this facility 12 times. There's nothing here. Command wants another sweep." Command is paranoid. The word hung in the air. Paranoid. The Voidborne Collective, which had never known individual neurosis, was developing paranoia. Ji-hoon waited until they passed, then continued his work. 20 minutes later, he was gone, leaving behind corrupted data that would poison the intelligence network for weeks. 200 kilometers away, Minho executed his own operation. He'd identified a voidborne ammunition depot. Heavily guarded, but poorly designed. The voidborne had never worried about internal sabotage before, so their security focused outward, not inward. Minho didn't blow it up. Instead, he carefully altered the chemical composition of stored explosives, making them unstable. They would detonate randomly over the next few weeks, creating the impression of widespread sabotage. More importantly, it would make the voidborne question every stockpile, every warehouse, every supply cache across their entire empire. On Earth, a young Marine named Jinwoo studied the incoming reports from the front. He had enlisted hoping to fight in glorious battles, to prove humanity's worth alongside alien warriors. Instead, he watched as 2 men accomplished what armies couldn't. "How do they do it?" he asked his commander. The older officer, a veteran of Earth's last colonial war, smiled. "They understand something that most species never learn. War isn't about how many soldiers you have. It's about breaking the enemy's will to fight. But they're just 2 people. Sometimes that's all you need. 2 people in the right place, doing the right thing, at the right time. They're not fighting the Voidborne army. They're fighting the Voidborne mind." Elder Tivra, a historian from a species that had existed for millions of years, requested access to all data regarding the human operations. The Federation Council, curious about her interest, approved. She spent weeks analyzing every report, every tactical decision, every psychological impact. Finally, She sent a message to the council. I have witnessed 1,000 wars across my lifespan, she wrote. I have seen empires rise and fall, technologies that could destroy stars, strategies that spanned centuries. But I have never seen anything like this. The humans have weaponized fear itself. Not through terror or cruelty, but through patience and precision. They are teaching us that the most powerful weapon in the universe is the enemy's own imagination. Node 7's hunting party deployed to Talos Prime with sophisticated tracking equipment. Core then studied radiation signatures, atmospheric disturbances, probability patterns. He was the best tracker in the known galaxy. Where would you go? Node 7 asked him. Core then looked at the planetary map. That's the wrong question. Don't ask where he is. Ask where he'll be. Explain. Your Reaper doesn't hide from you. He guides you. Every attack, every sabotage, it's pushing your forces into patterns. He's herding you like prey. To what purpose? Core then pointed at the map. To there. The Prime Nexus. He's clearing a path to your command center. Node 7 felt that foreign emotion again. Fear. Impossible. The Nexus is hidden, shielded, protected by our entire fleet. And yet, Core then said quietly, I would bet everything I own that he already knows where it is. In orbit, hidden in the debris field of an ancient battle, Ji-hoon's probe transmitted data back to his suit computer. The probe had taken 6 weeks to drift into position, disguised as space junk, completely passive until activated. Now it showed him exactly what he needed. The location of the Voidborn Prime Nexus. Ji-hoon studied the massive bioship. Millions of Voidborn lived within it, all connected to the central consciousness. It was the heart of their empire, the source of their coordination. He sent a coded message to Yuna. Just 3 words. Target identified. Going in. On the Federation flagship, alarm bells rang. Admiral Seo pulled up Ji-hoon's last transmission. He's going after their command ship? Seo's voice rose. That's a suicide mission. There are millions of Voidborn protecting it. He's not asking for permission, Yuna noted quietly. He's informing us of his intent. Ambassador Taejin looked at the tactical display. The Voidborn Empire, which had seemed unstoppable 2 months ago, was now pulling forces from across the galaxy to protect one location. He's done it, Taejin said with quiet awe. One man has made them bend their entire army to his will. Not through strength, but through fear. In the darkness of space, Ji-hoon prepared for his final approach. The hardest part wasn't reaching the Nexus. It was making them believe he was already there. The bioship was alive in every sense of the word. Its corridors pulsed with organic tissue. Walls shifted and adapted. Sensor organs grew from the ceiling like strange flowers. The entire structure was designed to detect intruders, to recognize anything that didn't belong to the collective. Ji-hoon moved through it like a ghost through mist. His suit had been modified with organic coating, biological signatures that mimicked Voidborn chemistry. He moved during shift changes when thousands of Voidborn transferred between sections. He walked with their rhythm, matched their patterns, became just another shadow in a ship of millions. The bioship's internal defenses were impressive. Living tissue that could seal corridors, neural networks that monitored every section, antibody systems that attacked foreign organisms. It was a fortress that had evolved over centuries to be impenetrable. But evolution prepared you for known threats. It didn't prepare you for something that thought completely differently. Node 7's hunting party arrived at the Nexus 3 hours after Ji-hoon infiltrated. Core then immediately began scanning for trace signatures, while Node 7 coordinated with internal security. Seal all entry points, Node 7 commanded. Full scan of every section. If the Reaper is here, we'll find him. When you find him, Core then corrected, he'll already be where he wants to be. What makes you certain he's already inside? Core then pointed at the security monitors. Because your soldiers are already looking for him. See how they check corners? How they hesitate before entering rooms? He's in their heads, even if he's not in your ship. Node 7 watched the monitors. Core then was right. Voidborn soldiers, who normally moved with machine precision, were showing signs of caution, of fear. The collective consciousness was fracturing under the weight of its own paranoia. Deep in the bioship's central sectors, Ji-hoon planted the first device. It wasn't a bomb or a weapon. It was a speaker, so small it could fit on a fingernail, broadcasting at frequencies that the Voidborn neural network could detect. The message was simple, played on a loop, whispers in their own language. He's here, in the walls, watching, waiting. The whispers fed directly into the collective consciousness. Every Voidborn in the ship heard them, not with ears, but with their minds. And because they all shared one consciousness, the whispers multiplied. Millions of minds heard the message simultaneously, each one adding to the other's fear. Dr. Suji monitored the Voidborn neural transmissions from her lab, watching in real time as the collective began to fracture. "It's beautiful in a terrible way," she told Yuna over the communication link. "He's using their greatest strength against them. The shared consciousness that makes them so coordinated is now spreading fear like a disease. Can they shut it down? Only by severing the connection entirely. But if they do that, they stop being Voidborn. They become individuals." Admiral Seo's fleet positioned itself at the edge of the Kelvar Nebula. They couldn't enter without being detected, couldn't provide support. All they could do was wait. "Sir, Voidborn fleet movements are erratic," reported the tactical officer. "Ships are breaking formation, returning to the bioship, then deploying again. They seem confused." "They are confused," Ambassador Teijin said from the Admiral's command deck. "They're hunting a ghost inside their own headquarters. Every shadow could be the Reaper. Every sound could be his approach." Young Jinwoo stood at his station, monitoring communication intercepts. "Sir, I'm picking up massive amounts of internal Voidborn chatter. They're arguing with each other." "Arguing?" Seo frowned. "The collective doesn't argue, they share one mind." "Not anymore," Jinwoo replied, sending the data to the main screen. "Different nodes are reporting conflicting information. Some say the Reaper is in Sector 4. Others say Sector 9. Some think there are multiple infiltrators." Teijin smiled grimly. "Ji-hoon's not just in their ship, he's in their heads." Inside the bioship, Ji-hoon planted his second device in the officer quarters. This one emitted a scent, a chemical compound designed to trigger stress responses in Voidborn biology. Nothing harmful, just uncomfortable. Enough to keep them on edge, unable to rest. He moved through ventilation systems, crawled through maintenance tunnels, used the bioship's own organic structure as camouflage. The ship's immune system tried to detect him, sending antibody patrols through the corridors. Ji-hoon avoided them with patient precision. The third device went into the nutrition processing center. It released harmless bacteria into the food supply, just enough to cause mild digestive discomfort. Nothing serious, nothing traceable, but enough to make every Voidborn in the ship feel slightly wrong. Death by 1,000 cuts. Ji-hoon wasn't destroying the bioship. He was making it uninhabitable, turning their fortress into a prison of paranoia and discomfort. Commander Nara studied the tactical situation with growing understanding. She had spent the last month reading every piece of human military history she could find. Vietnam, World War II resistance movements, ancient Earth guerrilla campaigns. They all follow the same pattern. She told her officers. Make the enemy afraid of their own shadow. Force them to waste resources on security. Turn their strength into weakness. "But the Reaper is alone," one officer protested. "How can one person?" "He's not alone," Nara interrupted. "He has the Voidborn's imagination working for him. They see him everywhere because they fear him everywhere. He's fighting millions of enemies with millions of versions of himself, and none of them are real, except the one they can't find." Collective Shard 189, a Voidborn battle unit comprising 3,000 soldiers, stood guard at the bioship's primary docking bay. They had been on high alert for 17 hours. No sleep, no rest, constant vigilance. One soldier heard a sound behind him. He spun around, weapon ready. Nothing there. "Did you hear that?" he transmitted to his unit. Hear what? A footstep. Metal on metal. The entire unit went on alert, scanning the bay with sensors and weapons. They found nothing. But now, they all heard it. Footsteps. Breathing. Movement in the shadows. None of it was real. Their own fear was creating sounds, their stressed minds generating threats from nothing. But in a shared consciousness, one soldier's hallucination became 3,000 soldiers' reality. Shard 189 opened fire on empty space, their weapons creating more noise, more chaos, more fear. Other units responded, rushing to support, finding no enemy but feeling the same paranoia. Node 7 watched from the command center as reports flooded in. Multiple contacts reported throughout the ship. Weapons discharged in 16 sectors. No confirmed enemy sightings. He's making us fight ourselves, Node 7 said quietly. Core then nodded. Your Reaper understands something most warriors don't. The greatest enemy is the one you create in your own mind. How do we stop it? You can't. Not until you find him. And finding him means thinking like him. Core then studied the bioship's layout. Where would I go if I wanted to destroy a hive mind? The answer was obvious. The Prime Nexus Chamber, where the central consciousness resided. They rushed through the corridors, Node 7's hunting party, and a company of elite guards. The Nexus Chamber was supposed to be the most secure location in the entire ship, protected by layers of security that even the best infiltrator couldn't penetrate. They burst into the chamber and found Ji-hun standing there, motionless, watching the massive organic neural core pulse with bioluminescent light. Core then raised his weapon. Node 7 signaled the guards to surround him. But Ji-hun didn't move. Didn't even turn around. You're too late, he said quietly. You've accomplished nothing, Node 7 responded. The Nexus is undamaged. You're alone. Surrounded. With no escape. Ji-hun finally turned to face them. His expression was calm, almost gentle. I don't need to damage it. I already infected it. Node 7 accessed the Prime Nexus directly. Horror flooded through its consciousness. The whispers, the stress, the fear, it had all been uploaded into the collective over the past hours. Every void-born mind was contaminated with doubt, with paranoia, with individual fear. The hive mind was cannibalizing itself. Nodes were disconnecting to escape the emotional feedback. Others were creating false memories to explain the inexplicable. The perfect unity was shattering into millions of frightened individuals. What have you done? Node 7 whispered. I gave you what you never had before, Ji-hun replied. Individual consciousness. Fear. The ability to question orders. I didn't destroy the collective. I freed you from it. Node 7 felt its connection to the Prime Nexus weakening. For the first time in its existence, it was alone in its own mind. The sensation was terrifying and liberating. Core then lowered his weapon slowly. You're not a soldier, he said with something like respect. You're a teacher. A harsh one. Throughout the bioship, throughout the fleet, throughout the entire Voidborn Empire, the collective was fracturing, not through violence, but through the introduction of something they had never experienced. Individual thought, born from individual fear. The war wasn't over yet, but the Voidborn would never be the same. And Ji-hun, the Reaper, the ghost who bent armies with whispers and shadows, had accomplished something no weapon could. He had freed a species from its own tyranny. By teaching it to be afraid, the Voidborn Armada simply stopped. Admiral Co watched in disbelief as hundreds of warships drifted in space. Their weapons powered down. Their coordination shattered. No explosions. No final battle. No desperate last stand. Just silence. Status report, he demanded. Voidborn ships are not responding to commands, the tactical officer replied, his voice uncertain. They're broadcasting on all frequencies, but the messages are chaotic. Individual ships arguing with each other. No unified direction. They're falling apart, Commander Nara observed from her flagship. The collective consciousness has fragmented. Ambassador Tajin stood quietly, watching the screens. Centuries of galactic warfare had never produced a victory like this. No massive fleet engagement, no planetary bombardment, no desperate sacrifice, just one man who understood that sometimes the most devastating weapon was the enemy's own mind. Inside the bioship, Node 7 stood motionless as its connection to the Prime Nexus completely severed. For the first time in its existence, it was alone, truly, completely alone with its own thoughts. The sensation was overwhelming. Every decision, every thought, every fear belonged only to it. No shared consciousness to dilute emotions, no collective wisdom to rely on, no unified purpose to follow. "What are you?" Node 7 asked Jihoon again. "A soldier," Jihoon replied simply. "Like you were before they made you part of something that forgot how to be individuals. You've destroyed us." "No." Jihoon shook his head. "I've freed you. What you do with that freedom is your choice now." Kor then holstered his weapon. The hunt was over. But not in the way he had expected. "I've tracked prey across 100 worlds," he said slowly. "But you were never prey, were you? You were always the predator. I was just doing my job. Your job was to terrify an empire into collapse without firing a shot?" Kor then laughed, a deep rumbling sound. Humanity has a strange definition of just a job. Throughout the bioship, Voidborn soldiers experienced individual consciousness for the first time. Some panicked, overwhelmed by the sudden isolation. Others felt relief, freedom from the constant noise of shared thoughts. Most simply stood confused, trying to understand what it meant to be alone in their own minds. The Prime Nexus itself, the massive organic intelligence that had coordinated billions, began to shut down. Not from damage, but from overload. It couldn't process the chaos, couldn't maintain unity when every node was questioning, doubting, fearing. The hive mind was eating itself alive with uncertainty. Captain Daehyun received the extraction signal finally, after weeks of waiting. His team deployed to the bioship, expecting to fight their way through Voidborn defenders. Instead, they found Jihoon walking calmly through corridors filled with confused, disorganized enemies who barely noticed them. No resistance. No combat. Just bewildered individuals trying to understand their new reality. "Mission status?" Daehyun asked when they met. "Complete," Jihoon replied. "We can go home now." The Galactic Federation Council convened an emergency session. High Chancellor Vector stood before representatives from 24 species, trying to explain what had happened. "The Voidborn Collective no longer exists as a unified force," he announced. "Their fleet is dispersed. Their command structure collapsed. Their invasion halted. The war is over." Silence filled the chamber. Then, cautiously, questions began. "How many ships did we lose in the final battle?" "There was no final battle," Vector replied. "How many soldiers died in the assault?" "There was no assault." "Then how?" Ambassador Taejin stepped forward. "The human operators completed their mission. They infiltrated enemy command, disrupted their coordination, and introduced psychological elements that caused the collective consciousness to fragment." "2 soldiers defeated an empire?" a counselor asked incredulously. "They didn't defeat it," Taejin corrected. "They changed it. The Voidborn still exist, but they're no longer a hive mind. They're individuals now, each one dealing with the shock of independent thought." Commander Nara provided the tactical analysis. Human Special Operations Doctrine focuses on high-value targets, psychological impact, and asymmetric warfare. They identified the Voidborn's critical vulnerability, their dependence on shared consciousness, and exploited it. "This is not honorable warfare," protested a delegate from a warrior species. "No," Taejin agreed. "But it's effective, and it saved millions of lives on both sides." The council sat in stunned silence, processing the implications. Humanity, the youngest species in the Federation, had just demonstrated capabilities that centuries of galactic military tradition had never conceived. Requests began flooding in. Species wanted human military advisors, training programs in special operations, studies on psychological warfare. The galaxy was learning that power didn't just come from bigger ships and stronger weapons. Sometimes it came from knowing where to whisper and when to step softly. Dr. Suji published her findings on the Voidborn transformation. What had seemed like destruction was actually liberation. Individual Voidborn, freed from the collective, were beginning to form their own identities, make their own choices, live their own lives. Many struggled with the transition. The Federation established support programs, helping former collective members adjust to independent existence. Some chose to form small groups, creating limited shared consciousness networks. Others embraced complete individuality. Node 7, now calling itself 7, after human naming conventions, became an ambassador for the transformed Voidborn. It worked with the Federation to help its former collective members adapt to their new reality. The Reaper gave us something we didn't know we'd lost, 7 told Elder Tivra during an interview. Choice, fear, hope. All the things that make you an individual, rather than a cog in a machine. Do you hate him for what he did? Hate? 7 considered the question. I felt fear when I met him. Terror, even. But looking back, I feel gratitude. He showed us that being afraid means you have something worth protecting. Your own thoughts, your own existence, your own future. Elder Tivra included 7's testimony in her historical record. She titled it, The War Won in Whispers. How Humanity Taught the Galaxy to Fear and Hope. Ji-hoon returned to Earth without ceremony. No medals, no parades, no public recognition. Captain Dae-hyun's team touched down at a secure facility, where Commander Hyun and Lee Yuna waited. Status report? Hyun asked formally. Mission complete, sir. Enemy command structure eliminated. Collective consciousness fragmented. Immediate threat neutralized. Casualties? 0. Sir. Hyun allowed himself a small smile. Good work. Go home, Ji-hoon. Rest. We'll debrief next week. Ji-hoon didn't go to debriefing headquarters or military housing. He took public transportation to a modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood. No one recognized him. No one knew that the man sitting calmly on the train had just changed the course of galactic history. His apartment was exactly as he'd left it. Clean and simple. Ji-hoon changed out of his uniform, made tea, and stepped onto his small balcony. A tiny garden grew there, vegetables and herbs he'd planted months ago. His neighbors had watered them while he was gone. He spent the evening tending plants, removing weeds, checking growth. Simple work. Peaceful work. The kind that required no weapons, no stealth, no fear. Park Min-ho visited 2 days later, bringing rice cakes from a local shop. Did you see the news? Min-ho asked. They're calling it the miracle victory. Some delegates want to give us medals. We don't need medals, Ji-hoon replied, pouring tea. Agreed. I prefer being unknown. Min-ho sat down, looking out at the garden. Think they'll call us again? Eventually. There's always another war, another threat. And we'll go? Ji-hoon nodded slowly. It's what we do. But until then, I'm just a civilian with a garden. They sat in comfortable silence, 2 soldiers who had defeated an empire, now enjoying tea and watching plants grow. Across the galaxy, military academies began teaching new courses: human asymmetric warfare, psychological operations, special forces doctrine. The lessons learned from the Reaper's campaign spread through Federation forces. Young Jin-woo, inspired by what he'd witnessed, applied for human special operations training. He wanted to understand how quiet words and stealthy steps could accomplish what fleets and armies couldn't. His instructor, a veteran of Earth's colonial wars, gave him the first lesson. Power isn't about how much force you have. It's about knowing exactly where and when to apply it. A whisper in the right ear can topple a throne. A single step in the right direction can start an avalanche. Ambassador Tae-jin attended a Federation Council session where they discussed the future of galactic security. The alien representatives, once dismissive of human capabilities, now listened carefully to human strategic advice. You've changed everything, High Chancellor Vektar told him privately. The way we think about war, about power, about victory itself. I won. We just shared what we learned, Tae-jin replied. Humanity spent centuries fighting ourselves. We learned hard lessons about warfare, about psychology, about the cost of conflict. If that knowledge helps prevent future wars, then something good came from our violent history. On Earth, in his quiet apartment, Ji-hoon received a message from Yuna. Just 3 words. Well done, Reaper. He deleted it without responding. The name, Reaper, belonged to battlefields and shadows, to missions where quiet words and stealthy steps were needed. Here, he was just Ji-hoon, a man with a garden and a simple life. But if the galaxy needed him again, if another threat emerged that required someone who understood how to bend armies without breaking them, he would answer. Because that was what humans did. They adapted, they innovated, they found ways to win that others never imagined. And sometimes, the greatest victories came not from the strongest warrior, but from the soldier nobody saw coming, whose name alone could make armies hesitate, whose presence in the shadows could change the course of history. The Reaper had harvested fear and sown freedom. Now he tended his garden and waited, knowing that peace was temporary, but also knowing that when the time came, humanity would be ready, because quiet words and stealthy steps were just the beginning. The real power was understanding that sometimes the best way to win was to make your enemy defeat themselves.